Welcome to Paranormal City, where the supernatural meets the everyday. I'm your host, Greg, your guide to the unexplained, the eerie, and the downright chilling. Each week, we'll explore real-life paranormal encounters, strange phenomena, and the haunting stories pinned to locations around the globe. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, prepare to step into the unknown. The map is waiting, and so are the stories. Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for finding your way over to my first episode. I'm new to podcasting, but this is such a great opportunity for me to have the ability to discuss my paranormal interests. Now, this first episode launches the 50-state series. Each episode will take a look at paranormal phenomena in a specific state, where we'll talk about notable paranormal locations, the official state cryptid, and we'll read some personal stories that have been submitted by you. This is a great time to let you know that if you would like to submit your own story to be read on this podcast, please send it over to paranormalcitystories@gmail.com, and it may be read in a future episode. Just make sure to let me know what state and or city this happened at. Alright, and with that being said, let's go to the first story. All stories on this podcast have been granted with the full permission from the original author. This story comes from Reddit, submitted by the user bestturnover2102 in the subreddit Ghost. The title is, Haunting in My Apartment, What Do You Think Happened? This is going to be a bit of a lengthy post, so bear with me. I live in an apartment in Pennsylvania. The building is over 100 years old and is right next to a funeral home. I've been here and never really had a strange experience up until the last couple of weeks. I should also note that I have a child that lives with me half the time, the other half she's with her mom. One night while I was drifting off to sleep, I started feeling this onset of sleep paralysis. All of my limbs were going stiff and started to feel pinned down. Luckily, I was able to snap myself out of it by reaching for the closest thing to ground myself, which was my phone. I was able to sleep fine after that. Then maybe a week later, my daughter is asleep in her room, and that connects to my bedroom through a doorway that sits directly across from my bed. I woke up and saw the silhouette of a child standing against the wall next to the doorframe of my daughter's room. It was just this black mass, darker than the room, with no face or distinguishable limbs or hair, and it just stood there like it was staring at me. Her door was still closed, and the figure was on the side that would be covered by the door if it were open. I was definitely freaking out, but chose to ignore it, turning my gaze away from it, and went back to sleep. When I woke up a couple hours later, it was gone like nothing ever happened. Fast forward a few days, and my girlfriend and I are at a flea market and run into a medium selling her wares and talking to people. I told her what I was experiencing, and she looked concerned and told me to cleanse my apartment by burning sage. She also wanted me to put some on my daughter's forehead to protect her. The next day, my girlfriend and I go to my apartment to do the cleanse. While I was cleansing her room, my girlfriend was waiting in the kitchen, which has my front door. My girlfriend and I suddenly both hear the door slam itself shut. She actually saw it happen, but after that, my apartment has felt more peaceful and I no longer get a bad vibe. I do plan on moving out ASAP, though for different reasons. The next story comes from Reddit under the Ghost subreddit, submitted by username Suggest a Username, titled Gettysburg, Experiences as a Child, Town All Gray, I Hated It. I know there are a lot of posts about Gettysburg, but I figured I would add my own. I visited Gettysburg when I was 10. My father and two older brothers were crazy about anything Civil War related. They considered Gettysburg to be some kind of Civil War mecca. I had no strong interest in it. I love history, but I found my brother's obsession with the Civil War to be a little tiresome. Like, I know how important it is, but they acted like the world stopped for it, which it didn't. So, historically speaking, it wasn't my thing. It was July of 1976. We were staying in Lancaster and drove there. As soon as we entered the town, everything in my vision went gray. I remember looking out at the farm fields on our way there and how nice it looked. But soon after entering Gettysburg, it all went gray, hazy-like. And I got very, very anxious, sick to my stomach. Not like I was going to throw up, just slightly nauseous. My parents were not the most patient people at times, so I kept my feelings to myself. Everywhere we went, it was all gray out, like the colors had been drained out. We toured a few spots and I could not stop this feeling of being very afraid. Scared, I couldn't understand what was going on. We went to this one place that had a lot of these dioramas that depicted all of the events of the Battle of Gettysburg. At some point, I got really nauseous and terrified. I don't know why. I told my mother that I had to go outside. She came out and asked me if I was okay, and I just lied and told her that it was the heat. What I really wanted to do was get in the car and get out of there as fast as possible. Then the worst thing. I don't remember exactly where we were, but I just remember it being a big park. It might have been the cemetery or something, but I don't recall. All I remember was walking up a slight incline on a paved path. Then our group turned and walked across the grass. I could not and would not bring myself to walk on it. Like there was this terrible feeling of violating something. Remember, I was 10 years old and I did not know much about the details of the battle. I just knew I could not walk across the grass. My father, not the most patient guy, saw me hesitating. I remember him asking, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I can't walk here. It's like I'd be walking on dead bodies." Thankfully, my mother saw me and told me to wait where I was. I remember trying not to look anywhere. I just kept pacing around the path. Finally, they got back and we left that place. We stayed for a couple hours more. I couldn't wait to get out of that town. Just 5 years ago, I was relating my experience in Gettysburg with my friend George. I had not mentioned that I thought everything was great to him yet, just that I couldn't walk on the grass. He told me there were a lot of graves there and I would have been walking on dead bodies. His wife was something of a self-proclaimed psychic or some sort. She's a little out there, but very nice. She overheard my story and interrupted to ask, "Did everything look gray to you?" Honestly, I was shocked but also relieved, like I was validated. She claimed that when they've gone to Gettysburg, she sees soldiers everywhere. She said she saw them marching up a hill at some point. Anyway, that's my Gettysburg story. I didn't see any ghosts, but I think I experienced some kind of feeling or awareness. Besides the gray vision, it was this eerie sense of anxiety and dread that I recall. Interestingly, there has been other places where I have felt this. One of them is the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I avoid that neighborhood like crazy, especially the areas around the Bowery. Thanks for everyone who took the time to read this. This story is titled, "I Saw Something in August of 2020 in Historic Philadelphia near the Liberty Bell and U.S. Constitution," submitted by Irish Gambin Zero under the subreddit Paranormal. I live in Philadelphia, pretty close to Old City. It's a neighborhood on the border of the city, just at the foot of the Ben Franklin Bridge. Part of Old City contains the historic Philadelphia area where you'll find the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, the Constitution Center, and the Betsy Ross House, to name a few. I had just gotten a new BMX bike, a hobby I'm revisiting after many years. This was the summer of 2020 on a Friday, I believe in August. It was one of those hot, muggy summer nights and was pretty late in the evening, close to midnight. I had been riding down at Penn's Landing, a dock that's a hot skate and BMX spot. After riding a session, I cruised a bit past South Street, you might recognize South Street in the Always Sunny intro, and then came up behind the Betsy Ross house. I realized that I passed this area constantly, but the last time I had actually walked around the Independence Mall, which is the name of the area that had a few historical sites condensed within, was way back in 5th grade for a field trip. It was late. No tourists, no guides, just one guy stretching for a run, and 2 security guards on duty. Perfect time to explore. I cut through an alley by the Betsy Ross house and wound up behind Independence Hall. The cobblestone road there is wide, so I hop off my bike and walked across. On the other side is a large plaza with the Constitution Center. Off to the left, opposite of the Liberty Bell, there's a big grassy patch, almost like a small field. Scattered across it are a couple of colonial homes, probably older than America itself. I started cruising slowly along the U-shaped pathway past the front of the Constitution Center. I had my earbuds in, flipping through some songs on Spotify, colonial homes on my left. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a woman walking across the grass. For 2 or 3 seconds, I didn't think much of it, just someone crossing the field. Then something in my brain told me to look again. She was wearing a gown, white, maybe with a faint pink hue or an off-white shade. That alone didn't make me stop in my tracks. What did was her gown and her hair were moving, flowing as if caught in a storm breeze. But it was a dead still August night. No wind, no movement in the trees. If you've seen Ghostbusters, think of Sigourney Weaver after she becomes the gatekeeper, hair and gown drifting as if underwater, but much more modest in style. That's exactly what it looked like. She was strolling slowly towards one of the colonial houses. The downstairs lights were on, and so was one of the bedroom lights. Philly has plenty of historical homes where people still live, so I figured maybe she was a wedding guest returning from a reception. When she reached the step leading to the porch, something made me glance again. She wasn't walking up them. She was floating, moving smoothly upwards, knees never bending, her body gliding. When she reached the top, just a couple of feet from the door, she turned her head to look at me. But her face flipped forward. It's hard to explain. Think of Beetlejuice. When a character turns their head, but no matter the angle, the blank face always faces forward. Or the faceless twins from the second Matrix movie. That's what I saw. I was frozen. I turned my head towards the Constitution Center to see if the security guard was still around, but he wasn't. I looked back, she was gone. The house was completely dark. I couldn't have looked away for more than 3 seconds. I've always been this kind of person who tries to find the practical explanation first. My whole life, I've heard ghost stories, some even about house ghosts that linger in one spot, and I've always been able to explain them away. That's why I was a skeptic. But this, there was no way to make sense of it. I'm not saying that I'm a true believer now, but I'm not skeptical anymore because of that night. Less than 100 feet from the Constitution of the United States of America, I saw a ghost. This story is titled Paranormal Experiences on Mount Washington in Pittsburgh, submitted by Male Chockneyman 25 under the Ghost Story subreddit. One summer in the 90s, my brother was attending the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and he invited me to spend a week at his house on Oneida Street in Mount Washington. He lived there with 3 other roommates. On the very first day, my dad drove me in. As soon as we arrived, my brother told us that he was trying out for a heavy metal band as their lead drummer. He's been practicing for 2 months straight, every single night with a cassette tape, just playing electrical guitar and acoustics on the tape, no vocals or drums, so he could learn the songs and play along. But then he told us something strange. Lately, his radio has been turning on by itself and playing that exact cassette. He also said that there was a weird noise on the tape now, sounds that weren't there when he first got it. Naturally, my dad and I were curious, so my brother popped in the tape. At first, I heard loud, distorted guitar playing. After a couple of minutes, though, it started to fade into the background, and then I heard it. Deep, guttural growls, something angry yelling or talking, but it sounded backwards. The sound chilled me to its core. I'd never heard anything like it. I glanced at my dad, shaking my head in disbelief. He said, "Whatever that is, it sounds evil and angry." He told my brother to either return the tape to his musician friend or burn it. That's when my brother started telling us more. Since moving into the house, he and his roommates have been hearing footsteps going up and down the stairs and pacing the hallways. Items would vanish, only to reappear somewhere else. TVs turned on and off by themselves, doors opening on their own. And there was more. Both my brother and another roommate had drum kits, and some nights they'd hear tapping on the drums when no one was playing. One night, my brother's girlfriend stayed over. The next morning while he was in the shower, she burst in, terrified, and told him the bed had started shaking and then lifted off the floor. A week before I arrived, one of his roommates had run out of the house in the middle of the night, pale as a ghost, and never came back. He left all of his belongings behind and never explained why. After hearing all of this, I had a decision to make. Go home with my dad to Johnstown or stay the week in what sounded like a haunted house. I was 14 years old and I didn't want to seem like a wimp, so I stayed. But mentally, I was shaking. The first night, I dreaded bedtime. I thought maybe I'd pull an all-nighter just to make it through. My brother had classes early the next morning, so when we went to bed, I made a little spot for myself on the floor next to his bed. Around 3:30 in the morning, I got that unmistakable feeling, like something was watching me. The chills ran up my spine, then I heard a creaking in the hallway, slow, deliberate footsteps. Suddenly, the bedroom doors slammed open, and all 3 large window blinds shot upward, smacking the ceiling, and then dropped back down. I jumped up into a fighting stance, heart pounding, and yelled, "Come on, you want a piece of me?" My brother shot up in bed. "What the hell was that?" he asked. I told him exactly what happened, and he just said, "Don't worry, it won't hurt you." And I stood there, staring out into the dark hallway, completely frozen. In that moment, I seriously regretted staying, but my dad was an hour and a half away, so I just sat back down against the bed and waited for daylight. The rest of the week, I got through it by drinking beer until I passed out each night. Every now and then, I still heard footsteps or creaking while watching TV in the living room. But after the first night, the spirit never directly messed with me again. I don't know if it accepted me or just got bored. To this day, I wonder if anyone else who stayed in that house had similar encounters. This next story is an answer to a question that was posed in the paranormal subthread, and the question was, anyone live in or near Philadelphia, have any personal experiences, or know of anywhere in the city that might be haunted? The submission was posted by Gangsta Gardner, and here's their story. I live and work in Delaware County, and I can tell you this, nursing homes are full of spirits. One evening, I was on a 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, caring for a woman who was actively dying. Her 2 daughters were with her, crying their eyes out and asking the kinds of questions people do in those moments, especially, when? I never thought I could answer that, until I saw it. A black shadow appeared to the right of the room, near the closet. It faded in and out. Every time I looked directly at it, it would vanish. But the moment I turned away, I catch it again in the corner of my eye. Eventually, I had to leave the room, leaving the daughters and their dying mother with the shadow. Someone, I assumed, was coming to take her. That wasn't the only strange thing that I've seen there. I've watched charts fall from the racks with no one near them. I felt the pressure of a palm on my right shoulder, only to turn and find the space empty. I've heard footsteps behind me when I knew I was alone. One unit in particular always seems to be the most active. Then there was the main lobby. He roams the entrance and nearby offices, making noises and turning on radios in the middle of the night, usually around 3 a.m. A few times I've told him flat out, stop, I'm not in the mood, and strangely enough, he listens. Despite everything, nothing I've experienced there has ever felt threatening, at least not in the nursing home. My mother's house, on the other hand, that's haunted by the spirit of my grandmother. We've heard footsteps, doors opening and closing, and objects moving, sometimes switching places entirely. The most terrifying moment came one afternoon when I was carrying things from the second floor to my SUV in the driveway. As I headed down the steps, I felt someone rush up behind me. There was a static-like whisper in my left ear. It felt urgent. I panicked and the cold air around me made the hairs on my neck and arms stand up. I didn't stop to think. I bolted out of the door and caught my breath outside, reminding myself, it's only my grandmom. The activity started right after she died in 1999, never before that day. I eventually went back inside and told her firmly never to do anything like that again. If she wanted to say hello, fine, but chasing me down the stairs like that? Too much. I've worked other haunted places too. When I was in my early 20s, I worked night shifts at a building that used to be an orphanage before it became a nursing home. Sometimes in the still hours of the night, I'd hear babies crying, and I was the only one there. The next story is titled Quentin Tavern, Quentin, PA, submitted by Pins Needles in the Paranormal subreddit. Dating back to the late 1700s, the Quentin Tavern was originally built as a manor house on a large estate tied to either the Penn family or the Coleman family. In the 1840s, the manor was converted into a tavern and rest stop for travelers along the Great Conestoga Road and the Forbes Road. The two roads eventually joined, becoming the Pennsylvania Road. It's a place with history and a reputation for being haunted. I worked there for about 4 years after my best friend, the kitchen manager, got me a job. My first real brush with the paranormal happened one night after work. The main floor was the restaurant. Above that, there was an apartment, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a bath, and 2 living spaces. The top floor had 4 rooms with no electrical outlets, creaking wood floors, and names carved into the walls dating back to the 1800s. At the time, my friend lived on the top floor, while the head chef stayed in the apartment below. Only 2 of the rooms upstairs were set up for use, my friend's room and a quote-unquote guest room he made by putting a bed in one of the other rooms. The other 2 were used for storage. That night, we had a few drinks before turning in. My friend passed out in his room, and I went to the guest room to crash. As I lay there, I found myself wishing for a cigarette, but I already smoked the last one. I thought about going to ask him for one. That's when I heard footsteps in the hall, heading down the stairs, probably for a drink. I figured I'd wait until he came back. 10 minutes passed, no sign of him. Finally, I got up to go find him, and found him still in his bed, fast asleep. That was my first chill in the Quentin Tavern. A couple years later, the head chef moved out, and my friend moved down to the apartment. I asked the owner if I could take the top floor. He said yes. There was no electricity up there, so I ran an extension cord from the apartment to my room for my TV and PS3. The first night was the worst. I felt eyes on me the entire time, an uncomfortable, heavy awareness. I kept glancing at the crack on my door, looking out into the dark hallway while I played Dead Island. It was a Thursday night, I remember because the next day was payday. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a sharp metallic clang, like a spoon dropping from the ceiling onto the hallway floor. Loud. Too loud. I froze, listening for footsteps or laughter, thinking maybe one of my friends was messing with me. Silence. I slammed the door shut over the extension cord, wedging it so tightly it would take some real force to open. Lights on, Netflix running. I tried to sleep. When my alarm went off around 10 a.m., the door was wide open, wide enough to touch the wall. I tested it. No way could it have blown up on its own. I moved into the quote-unquote guest room the very next night. Things felt calmer, but still, a couple nights each week I'd hear the same metallic spoon drop, sometimes followed by a dragging sound down the hallway. And in the mornings before work, I'd hear what sounded like my friend's girlfriend's kid running around the stairs, only to go down and find the place empty. Needless to say, I didn't sleep much there. The Quentin Tavern, great place to eat, terrible place to sleep. Okay, so those are all of the stories for today. As a reminder, if you do want to submit a story of your own, go ahead and send one over to paranormalcity@gmail.com. Make sure you include the state and city where this encounter has occurred, and then I'd be happy to read it in a future episode. So for this segment of the episode, we're now going to go ahead and do a quick recap in regards to the stories that I've just read. And I'm also going to go ahead and do some fun stuff. I'm going to go through the top 4 most haunted locations in the state of Pennsylvania. I also pulled up a list of the top 4 cryptids that are roaming around the state of Pennsylvania as well that I wanted to mention and talk about too. So I wanted to talk about the first one that I read, the haunted apartment submitted by Best Turnover 21 with the Shadow People. So yeah, this is a interesting one, I can say. So a couple of things. First off, when I messaged the user who submitted this story, he wanted to let me know that he is from Pittsburgh, and more specifically the Ambridge area. So just want to throw that out there. So when I am reading this story, the first thing that comes into my mind are shadow people. And shadow people are kind of interesting. And to my understanding of their presence is usually they would come when there is some sort of shift in your life, right? So you are battling heavy depression or anxiety. A lot of what I've heard is when shadow people come, they are there for that despair. They're there for that depression period of your life and can show in that manner. Now, the fact that he listened and got Sage was, I think, a pretty good move. I know when I first moved into my now house, my wife and I, we did experience a couple of weird phenomena around the house, like noises and just a feeling of uneasiness. And one of the things that we didn't do, just from our lack of knowledge of buying a home for the first time, is that we did not bless the home. This was a foreign concept to me, not something that I was that familiar with, but I was told by many folks that, yeah, it's important to bless the home, to make sure that if you're starting something new, to make sure that you bless the home. It's best to go through with sage and so forth to make sure that you're letting the house know that you're starting anew, which is what we did eventually. And I will say, after using the sage, it did make our house feel a lot calmer and a lot more peaceful. I know I was at ease, my wife was at ease, and such. So there is that. Now, there could have been a bunch of other things that this could have been. It sounds very scary to witness for sure. I don't know how I would imagine waking up and seeing a shadow figure, especially near my child's room as well, that would petrify me. So a lot of things I'm sure went through that person's mind as they experienced that. But I'm happy that the sage seemed to work and that it appeared that there was no more issues moving forward. For the second story in regards to Gettysburg, yes, you will find out that Gettysburg is a mecca, not only for Civil War, but also for a lot of haunting encounters that you will hear of in Pennsylvania. Spoiler alert, one of the top 4 locations that are on my list is Gettysburg. So with that said, as a reminder, the submitter was talking about that he went into Gettysburg and then he started feeling this vision of gray, right? Well, I do have somewhat of a relatable experience to that. Not so much of a gray feeling, but more so much of a overwhelming feeling that consumes you once you enter a place. I took a trip out to Sedona, Arizona a couple years ago. And for the first time, I drove into Sedona with a couple of friends and my now wife. And when we drove what felt like through the entrance of Sedona, right? I immediately felt this feeling of overwhelmingness and also this feeling of awareness, if that makes sense. It wasn't this gray feeling, and it wasn't a negative feeling either, but it was more so this feeling of self-awareness, feeling that I had this different shift. Now, keep in mind, Sedona might be a extreme example, and for anyone who isn't familiar with Sedona, Arizona, just to kind of explain a little bit, so Sedona's famous for what's called like energy vortexes. And these are places in nature where the Earth's energy is said to be especially strong, and it's like a swirling and concentrated area. So the vortexes aren't visible, like you're not going to see like a glowing portal or some sort of light spinning. Instead, like visitors who come to Sedona, they describe a feeling of like a sense of calm or heightened awareness, like I was talking about earlier. Or even like a physical sensation like tingling skin, rush of warmth, gentle pull towards the land, and so forth. Because of these vortexes, Sedona has become like a very spiritual hub. So you'll find like crystal shops, energy healers, and such. So I can go on, and I can definitely do that too in the Sedona episode. So if you guys do have any stories or paranormal experiences about Sedona, send them over, again, to paranormalcity@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to read them and talk about Sedona a little bit more. But going back to Gettysburg, the reason I brought this up is because you can have an area that has a lot of subtle vibrations to it, if I'm saying that right. So Gettysburg, for example, there's a lot of trauma, a lot of history, and those vibrations from that trauma and history, it doesn't stay stagnant in one time. At least that's what I believe. That's something that you can feel that vibrations over a course of time, and you'll be able to feel those overwhelming thoughts that were felt during a major event in time. Kind of similar with Sedona in a way, but it's more so literal because there's these things that you can feel because of this literal energy that's being placed there. But yeah, I'm surprised more people don't enter Gettysburg with that overall shift of gray, right? So very interesting. What about the story from Philadelphia with the floating woman that was going up the stairs in historical Philly? So I did a little bit more research. I was trying really hard to find where exactly this person saw the ghost. And I'm actually from Philly, so I'm a little familiar, but I did need to get onto Google Maps to walk through a little bit where they were. And I think where they saw the ghost was the American Philosophical Society. There's a small patch of grass there. It's on cobblestone. There's a couple of steps leading up to the building. So I think that's the one. And if it is, it's actually pretty interesting because it's rumored, backstory, the American Philosophical Society was founded by Benjamin Franklin. And it's the oldest learned society in the United States. So there's a lot of history behind that building. And when you are in Philly, you may take a ghost tour and you will find that the American Philosophical Society is on the list of houses to look out for. So that's actually kind of interesting. It's actually rumored that Ben Franklin himself is haunting the place. The fact that there was a woman who was walking up to the building is even cooler. And again, if that's not the case, then so be it. I messaged the submitter. I just didn't get a response yet. For the submitter who worked in the nursing home, I think it was extremely funny that they would just have conversations with the ghost and yell at them saying, "Hey, you better not mess with me tonight." And the ghost would just respect the wishes, and the ghost would listen and not mess with her. So I think it's funny how I think it's cool how the person who submitted this does have like an ongoing relationship with those ghosts, and also sounds like they might be a little bit sensitive or psychic as well, which is pretty cool. It seems like later in her other comments that she had on that thread is that she was the only person that noticed anything. Some others have reported other experiences. She was usually the main person, it looks like. But yeah, I just think it was funny how she would have active conversations with them. It's pretty cool when you are able to do that. And then the next one is from the Quentin Tavern. Shout out to Pins Needles. So they sent me a bonus video that they had of a video a couple years back where they were interviewing the people who lived in the Quentin Tavern, which, by the way, is haunted by a ghost named Lucinda. I tried going on to public records just so I can see if I can find the name of Lucinda, which might have just been a name that the owners have called the resident spirit, or the name John, which was mentioned in the video that the sender sent over to me as well. His name is written on the walls upstairs in one of the resident suites. But I went online and I couldn't find anything on public record past 1950s, and the manor was built again in 1700, so didn't get too far with research there. But then again, very cool and interesting story. Okay, before we go into the top 4, I have to talk about the official cryptid of Pennsylvania, which is the Squonk. Alright, so living in Pennsylvania all of my life, I can tell you that I have never heard of the Squonk. But given what I see here from cryptophilia.com, the Squonk is a very unique and unusual cryptid that is found in the Hemlock Forest area of Pennsylvania. It is unique because it weeps and cries all the time because it believes it's so ugly. The lore with the Squonk, from what I found on the internet, is so funny. I've seen interviews where people say that their favorite cryptid would be the Squonk because of its unique backstory. So with the Squonk, what it looks like, it has a pig-like appearance with very loose and wrinkled skin that is covered in warts and blemishes. One of the most notable things about it is that it is always weeping and crying because it's so self-conscious about the way that it looks. People who stumble across the Squonk might not be able to get a good look at it because it will dissipate into its own tears with a matter of seconds. With the Squonk story, it was first told in a book called Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods with a Few Desert and Mountain Beasts, which was published in 1910 by William Thomas Cox. And the Squonk is celebrated every year at the Squonk Festival, also known as Squonkapalooza in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where it's a fun festival that is perfect for people to go and celebrate cryptids and creatures found in rich folklore. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and get into the top 4 haunted locations that are in Pennsylvania. The first one that I found in no particular order was Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So for anyone, again, who missed it earlier, or so for anyone who isn't familiar, for Gettysburg, in July of 1863, during the height of the Civil War, Gettysburg became the site of a 3-day battle between the Union and the Confederate forces. So over 160,000 soldiers fought here, and by the end, there were more than 50,000 casualties, dead, wounded, or missing. The fields, orchards, and ridgelines were left littered with bodies, and they were scattered all over. The scale of the suffering was very unimaginable, and the land itself became soaked in tragedy. So with that really tragic event that happened in America, some of the hauntings that came from that, Gettysburg is considered to be one of the most haunted locations in the United States. Reports of ghostly activities date back to generations and continue on. So common experiences include, and I'm just listing these off here, but phantom soldiers, residual sounds. There's been sightings in the orphanage and the Jenny Wade house, which is said to be haunted by children who lived there and sometimes suffered there. The Devil's Den, which is a rocky outcropping where some of the fighting took place, and visitors often report here malfunctioning of electronics, being touched, feeling watched. And then there's the Triangular Field. It's another hotbed of activity. This part of the battlefield, it's notorious for sudden drops in temperature and the feeling of being surrounded even when you're alone. Many who visit Gettysburg, so going back to the earlier story, describe a heaviness in the air and emotional weight that's hard to put into words. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, standing on those fields, knowing the scale of what happened, it's easy to understand why so many feel the past is really much alive there. The next one on my list, number 2, is Eastern State Penitentiary, somewhere that I've visited very frequently. So Eastern State Penitentiary, it's built in Philadelphia in 1829, and it introduced the Pennsylvania system. It's a radical prison model centered on solitary confinement as a means of penance and reform. The penitentiary housed infamous figures like Al Capone and Willie Sutton, who served some time there. With the isolation, inmates endured up to 23 hours a day in confinement. So punishments were harsh. There were mad chairs, ice baths. Severe sensory deprivations was common practice in the prison. After closing in 1971, it reopened to the public in 1994 as a historical site, offering tours and immersive exhibits. So some of the things that have been reported, visitors often describe the atmosphere as oppressive and somber. Energy clings to them from the empty cells. People often see apparitions and shadows. I know for me, one of the big reasons why I got into the paranormal was like every kid growing up in the early 2000s. I was watching Ghost Hunters, and one of the biggest episodes that they had was going to the Eastern State Penitentiary. So as soon as the episode aired, my father and I, we went to Eastern State for a tour, and it was very cool. And we caught a lot of orbs and so forth in our amateur ghost hunting investigation when I was a kid. But yeah, a lot of memories there. There's been said to have ghostly watchers, so like a silhouette is said to stand atop one of the guard towers. There's a report of a prison dog, so the legend has it that a black Labrador named Pep was sentenced to life in prison. Some say his spirit still roams the grounds. So a lot of history and a lot of paranormal experiences have been reported throughout the years. Okay, the third on my list is Fort Mifflin. Now, I might be a little biased here, but this is the other place my dad and I went and investigated along with Eastern State. But very cool site and a lot of paranormal activity happening here as well. So just some historical significance for you. Fort Mifflin was established in 1771. It was also known as a Fort Island Battery or Mud Island Fort. It was commissioned in 1771 and played a pivotal role during the Revolutionary War, withstanding intense British bombardments to delay the capture of Philadelphia. Later military use through the Civil War era, it served as a prison for the Confederate prisoners of war and Union deserters, and continued seeing use into the 20th century, eventually becoming a national historical landmark. So some of the haunted reputations is that today, Fort Mifflin is widely recognized as one of the most haunted locations in the U.S., and it often offers paranormal programs, including candlelit ghost tours, overnight stays, and such. So some of the ghostly encounters and legends that you'll hear about and maybe see at Fort Mifflin, the first one is the Faceless Man. So I feel like the Faceless Man is common throughout a lot of these types of places, but perhaps the most famous apparition, the ghost is believed to be William H. Howe, a Union soldier executed at the fort in 1864 under questionable circumstances. There may be other spirits that you may hear of as well, the Screaming Lady, Jacob the Blacksmith, which I think I have some photos of, at least orbs. and then other apparitions, including children and dogs and so forth. When you're at Fort Mifflin, visitors and staff recount disembodied footsteps, touches, whispers, orbs of light. So a very interesting spot to visit if you're ever in the Philadelphia area. Okay, and the final one on my list is the Pennhurst State School and Hospital, also known as the Pennhurst Asylum. So historical background here, it opened in 1908 in the Eastern Pennsylvania State Institution for the feeble-minded and epileptic. Pennhurst was intended to serve individuals with intellectual and physical disabilities. Its campus expanded over 634 acres within over 30 brick buildings connecting by tunnels and walkways. From the outset, the institution was severely overcrowded, underfunded, and understaffed. At its peak in 1950, it housed over 3,500 residents with over just 600 staff members. An estimated 10,600 people lived there over its 79 years, with about half dying within the walls. In 1968, investigative reporter Bill Baldini released a 5-part expose called Suffer the Little Children, revealing neglect, abuse, and horrifying conditions, sparking public outrage and legal action. A landmark lawsuit, which was Halderman versus Pennhurst, found the institution in violation of residents' constitutional rights, ultimately leading to its closure in 1987. So after years of decay and partial demolition, the site has reopened as the Pennhurst Asylum, a haunted attraction now offering daytime historical tours, paranormal investigations, and large-scale events like Paracon, which is one of the East Coast's largest paranormal conventions. And if you've never been to Pennhurst Asylum, as soon as you enter the gates, you are in awe. It's like you have stepped back into another time. It is something out of this world and very, very cool to see. With a lot of the paranormal activity and haunted reputation, Pennhurst's brutal past has left a heavy, unsettling energy. Visitors frequently report shadow figures, doors slamming, whispered voices, footsteps, moans, and feelings of being touched or watched. One common apparition is a little girl. You oftentimes, doing the tours, may hear children's voices. The Mayflower Hall, I think I've been in there before. There's a couple buildings, and some are restricted and some aren't. But it's widely considered the most haunted building on campus, and it's featured in paranormal investigations. This is another one where a lot of ghost hunter TV shows have gone ahead and shot as well. That wraps up today's episode. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Pennsylvania's most paranormal. If you've enjoyed today's stories, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you have any paranormal stories that you'd like to share, please email them over to paranormalcitystories@gmail.com with the city and state where it happened, and your story could be featured in a future episode. And until next time, keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and your lights on.